Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. Once again, my name is Brendon Kaplan. I'm the Senior Marketing Specialist here at AdTech, and today we're going to be covering in our series Being Agile with Atlassian, our third of fifth webinar titled Agile Release Management with Atlassian. So we're going to be going over a lot of very interesting information today, and at AdTech, we believe in giving you real technical information in a webinar and giving you actual details in how to implement solutions. So there's actually going to be quite a bit of information today, and for that reason, we're going to be recording this webinar for you. I'm sure that a lot of you will want to go back over it maybe one or two times so that you can catch the minor details and idiosyncrasies that pop up and don't have to be scribbling furiously during the webinar to get down every little last piece of information. So make sure to kick back, relax, try and enjoy the overall flow of it, because rest assured you will be able to get access to it in the future. And without further ado, we'll get started. So given that you're already here, we assume that you know a little bit about us, but for the record, AdTech is a software configuration specialist company. We've been providing professional software services for over 8 years, and we are proud to be certified Atlassian experts. And we have really specialized in managed hosting with a few custom solutions that we've developed, build automation, custom development, including plugins and deployments, as well as agile workflow configuration, and of course, general consultation. And obviously, we also know who Atlassian is, but because we all love talking about them so much, developers of collaboration software for teams, and they've created Jira and Confluence. We're going to be using some of their tools today in order to implement the technical solution we're about to show you. So this is all an Atlassian ecosystem-based solution. Atlassian has been ranked as a leader in the software industry by Gartner, and even more so than that, they are now starting to get widespread recognition, not only in the technological media, but even in the mainstream media as well. So they're really doing some exciting things with really innovative companies like Tesla, and we're very proud to be partnering with them and working with them to deliver solutions. And over 30,000 companies currently use Atlassian tools to power their software teams, and we really believe in this market, and I'm sure you do too, which is why you're here. So our webinar series is Being Agile using Atlassian tools. In the past, we've done a recap on the Agile portfolio management process, including ideation, qualification, elaboration, the approval for construction, and being loaded for construction. In the next webinar, we did Agile requirements gathering process, including feature scoping, authoring and review, grooming and collaboration, traceability and reporting. And now we are on 3 of 5, which is the basic Agile release management process using Atlassian tools. We're going to be covering release planning, implementing a release, adding new features, enhancements, improvements, addressing bug fixes, and handling scope change, which being Agile, that's what we're here for. And finally, everybody's favorite part, launching the release. The tools that we're going to be using today from Atlassian are going to be Jira for issue tracking, Jira Agile for the project management, Stash as our code repository, and Bamboo for continuous integration and build server work. After this webinar, and we're not going to get too much into advertising for the future, but we're going to be doing 2 more. The 4 of 5 going to be Agile project management using Atlassian tools, and 5 of 5 will be Agile test management using Atlassian tools. So once again, my name is Brendon Kaplan. I'm the Senior Marketing Specialist, and the technical lead for this presentation today is going to be Anoop. He is a really, really great technical resource, and I've had the pleasure of working with him on building this webinar. So he's very great. Some of the common problems that people have faced with regards to release management that we've noticed in our 8 years of providing support is that the scope of change is inevitable. How are we going to get cross-functional teams to address these rapidly changing requirements? Sort of a corollary to that, as things change, you want to update things using minor releases. Let's just implement this feature. Let's just address that one bug. And you think, wow, this is going to be great. We're going to tell the product owners that we're going to finish this up, and it's going to happen in a few weeks. And then you find yourself dragging even months sometimes. This is not okay, and we're going to be addressing that today. One of the ways that we're going to be doing that is sort of asking the question, how are we going to enforce quality reviews across teams using a central system, and that's what we're going to be using these Atlassian tools for. We're doing that because sometimes there's no single point of visibility to get full release readiness, and creating a centralized system really provides a point at which we can go to answer all of these other questions. Not only that, it solves the issue that there's too much manual intervention when doing all of these things without a centralized system, and that creates artifact errors because different teams, it doesn't matter how smart they are, how hard they are working, they're just going to have different naming conventions. Somebody's going to call this type of file _1, and somebody's just else is going to call it file 01, which, as you know, can lead to some, I guess you could call them comical, but not so great problems. So we're going to be addressing that in this today as well. And I'm now going to take a moment and switch this over to Anoop, who's going to provide us the technical information. I'm very excited about it. And once again, if you have any questions during this webinar, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or ask in the chat window. I'm going to be standing by while Anoop's doing the technical presentation and be able to take down your questions and prepare them for answer later on. So thanks very much, and talk to you soon. Here comes Anoop.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, let me thank Brendon for highlighting few of the challenges faced by most of the organizations aiming for a disciplined agile release process. Now let us have a look at current release management scenario using Atlassian tools. But before that, let's have a quick look at what are the different types of releases being practiced in the organizations. Mainly software product lifecycle includes patches, minor or major releases, or even service packs and hot fixes, comprisingly of mainly features or improvements or bug fixes, as shown here. In further demo, I'll explain how the release planning can be done in agile way. We usually see that many different teams work with their diversified expertise like development team, testing team, build and release team, and so on. And on top of these, project management often struggles to get an insight to the ongoing release at any point before the release is launched. Now, all these teams participating in the release process use several set of tools, sharingly or exclusively, and it becomes practically and highly difficult to weave these teams together at certain point and keep everyone in the team updated about the progress of the release. Now, if you look at the high level process of release management captured here, it more or less remains the same in all the organizations using Atlassian tools. This is a typical setup in an application development or product development organizations. You can see that there are Atlassian tools used across by various participants or actors, and every tool is being used by one or many actors in different aspects. Like Jira and Jira Agile are being used by product owners or Scrum Masters for project management purpose, whereas developers, build and release engineers, or testers use Jira and Jira Agile to provide a status update to higher management. So the usual scenario is a ticket in Jira is the only work assigned to the developer, whereas the product owner wishes to monitor the progress of the ticket at every stage, and Jira ticket is the only means for him to understand the true status of the underlying implementation. A developer has to specifically handle the other tools like Stash or Bamboo, where he does not necessarily have an expertise. But in order to traverse from implementation to all the way to deploying on environments, the manual intervention of the developer or build and release group becomes important. In all, as you can see here, there are 14 manual steps being performed for each of the story implementation, and this multiplies with number of stories, which comes out to be a significant effort we are putting in carrying out a single release. So in the nutshell, we can say that developers, reviewers, testers, in fact everyone involved has some of the other issues, some of which are enlisted in front of us. Like developer is worried about what changes occurred overnight, or maybe Scrum Master wants to standardize the version control process and delivery process using different tools, or maybe product owner is concerned about how to cope up with the impact of the scope change. And in order to address these issues at such a granular level, we need a solution that fulfills few of the parameters. And these parameters are to have a simplified process by abstracting the software configuration management complexities from the developer, to integrate a tool, which in our case is Jira, with defined and automated branching and merging strategy, to eliminate the redundant and repetitive activities using automation, to abstract the software build and deployment complexities from the developer, to use a particular tool as a single point of control to drive the entire release management process. So here Jira can be used as that single point of control. And last but not the least, an upfront notification has to be provided to all the cross-functional teams as and when their contribution is required. Now with the solution designer AdTech, our scenario would change drastically. Here, Jira is used as a centralized place from where all the tools can be automatically operated to carry out several activities for each of the participating functional groups. With this, our emphasis would be on reducing the manual operation like developers' interaction with Git and build and release group modifying the bamboo plans during build deployment on selective environments or during change of environments and so on. I would like you all to pay special attention to the elimination of many repetitive and manual steps, the ones that are striked out, that usually used to lead us to the erroneous and time-consuming delivery. Also, many steps which are marked in green over here are automated, that makes the handling of the solution quick and easy. And with this approach, as you can see over here, the manual steps has been reduced from 14 to 7 in our case. So which is almost 50% of the manual intervention which has been saved with this solution. Now let us see how we can achieve this using Atlassian tool. To begin with, here is the standard branching and merging strategy we have used in this particular solution, where there is a master branch, and for every release of any kind, there would be a separate release branch. Every release will comprise of improvement or bug or a feature branch. So every epic, just to mention over here, every epic in Jira would create a separate feature branch onto stash. So there would be a one-to-one mapping between epic and feature in our solution. However, we can adopt any strategy practice in the organization as part of the solution, and the entire solution can be customized around the opted strategy. Now let us jump onto the live demonstration of the solution. And just before that, just to mention over here that we are considering a scenario where two developers are working on two different branches that have the same parent branch. So now let us go and see the live demonstration. So here for the demo purpose, we have considered two Agile boards. One is release board, using which release managers, product owners, or Scrum Masters can get a clear insight about the status or the progress of each of the releases being carried out for each of the application or product development in the organization. So here we can clearly see that there are three products being developed, are currently in development phase, of which one is OpenTrip Planner, OTP, MSCGen, and Sticks. And of them, if we can notice, OpenTrip Planner has an initial version or initial release which has already been launched, whereas there is an extended release, release 1.1, which is currently in scoping phase. Whereas MSCGen has an initial release, release 1.0, which is in currently in implementation phase. So along with this information, even the release, what all are the types of releases which are currently undergoing in the organization can also be found out using this particular board. So as we can see over here, the releases which are marked in green color are the one which are major releases, whereas the one which is marked as yellow is the one is a minor release, release 1.1 over here in this case. Purple color denotes that it's a patch release, whereas red color notifies that it's a hotfix. So along with this, there is another Agile board, which is the delivery board, which is meant for Scrum Masters and product owners. And using this board, Scrum Masters and product owners can find what a particular release comprises of. So here we can see that OpenTrip Planner release 1.1 comprises of two features, whereas Sticks release 1.1, which was the hotfix, comprises of one critical bug fix. Also, we can see over here at the bottom that there are certain number of features or improvements or bugs which are not yet aligned to any of the releases. So they are still in yet to be planned phase. So this will give a clear picture to Scrum Masters and product owners so as to decide what all features or improvements or bugs can be aligned to which particular release. Now let us see how a release can be planned. Now let us see how, first of all, before planning, let us see how a release can be created. So in order to create a release, let's consider an example where portfolio manager has come up with an idea of a new product called Excellent Table, and initial version or release 1.0 is currently being planned for this particular product. So here, any release can be created by selecting a issue type as release, and since a new product called Excellent Table is being developed, and this release is for that particular new product, so summary has to be provided with that particular product name. Once that is done, there are few other information needs to be provided, like release type, whether it's a major release, minor release, a patch release, or a hotfix. So in our case, it's a major release. Any release can be a extended release or a fresh release. In case of any extended release, the base version needs to be provided from where the code base would be checked out, and that particular code base would be enhanced as part of new version or an extended version. In our case, it's a fresh release. Now, once we select fresh release, this particular solution performs various automations onto other Atlassian tools. So one such automation would be creation of a new project and a repository on Stash. So Stash repository name has to be provided over here. Then expected release date is to be provided, and initial scope freeze date needs to be given. Once this information has been given over here, there are certain more information which needs to be configured during creation of a release, like deployment configuration. So here, considering that here for this particular demonstration, we have considered that a release build will undergo performance testing. Then it will go on to the pre-production environment, and once the sign-off has been given, it will be finally the release build will be deployed onto the production environment. Now, without taking much time on to deployment configuration, just to mention over here that these instance details are being managed in a separate project in Jira, which contains entire configuration of all the IT assets or IT infrastructure being managed across the organization. So at runtime, we can simply go and configure each of the environment where the deployment is required, and there is no need to configure Bamboo plans with these details. So this would be helpful in future where if in case any environment gets changed due to some or the other reason, and in that case usually Bamboo plan needs to be reconfigured. So that particular effort would be saved by simply changing the environment details on this particular release Jira ticket. So once this information is given, then roles can also be provided such that right information would be provided to right individual at the right time. So once we click on create, a new release gets created. So as you can see over here, there is a new product called Excellent Table, and a new release for the initial launch gets created over here. And now with this issue type release, this particular issue type release follows a particular workflow. Atlassian doesn't recommend or force any particular workflow for release management, but AdTech has come up with this particular customized release management workflow, which weaves together various other Atlassian tools with Jira. And soon you will notice that various activities automatically happening on the other Atlassian tools in correspondence with each of the stages in release management process in Jira. So if I can show you some of the automation or automation happening over here. So here onto Stash, we can see there was no repository earlier being created for Excellent Table, and now with the creation of a release onto Jira, there is been auto creation of the new repository called Excellent Table. Similarly, onto Jira, there was no version being created earlier for Excellent Table, but with the creation of a new release for Excellent Table, there is a new version gets auto created for Excellent Table as well. Now, just to mention over here that maintaining versions is an out-of-the-box functionality of Jira, but as part of this particular solution, we have extended this particular functionality so such that this release version keeps an automated track of all of that particular release, such that what all are the features, improvements, or bug fixes which are undergoing as part of this release will be tracked automatically by this release version. And this would be helpful while during creation of release notes. So that particular section we'll see in the later half of the demo. So now once the release has been created, let's see how a release can be planned. So for release planning, let's consider a scenario of an extended release where the initial launch of OpenTrip Planner has already been done, and as part of initial launch on production environment, we can see over here, this is the user interface which has been deployed on the production environment as part of release 1.0. So which consists of a map and few of the options like search type, search setup, and download image tool. Now, for further demonstration as part of extended release planning and implementation, we'll see how this particular user interface would be enhanced with inclusion of a table and a search option at the top. Now, let us see how a release can be planned. So, let us consider the minor release or an extended release, release 1.1. So here we can see that release 1.1 includes two of the feature 1 direction, which is direction coordinates table, and feature 2, which is pathfinder feature. Now let us assume that product owner or Scrum Master identifies that this particular feature 2 pathfinder feature requires significant effort, and implementation of this particular feature may delay the release date of release 1.1, which release manager or product owner doesn't want, and they decide to go with an approach where where feature 2 would be postponed for further release, and instead some other improvement or bug fixes can be taken up which are of lesser scope and without pushing the date of the release date of release 1.1. So now let us see how a release plan can be done. So here release can be planned just by clicking on plan release button, and since they have decided to exclude the pathfinder feature, so just by selecting the particular feature from exclude, this particular feature can be excluded. Now since they are looking for some other improvement or bug fixes which are of lesser scope to be included as part of this release, they can go onto the delivery board and they can look at the section for yet to be planned release, which are not yet aligned to any of the release right now. So let's consider that this particular improvement, which is for search option on map, is chosen to be included as part of this particular release. So here they can go and start typing search option on map and include this particular improvement ticket, and just by clicking on plan release, we can see over here that the initial scope of this particular release 1.1 gets changed to by change to containing only feature 1, which is direction coordinates table, and an improvement search option on map. So once the initial scoping has been done and release product owner is fine with the initial scoping, they can mark this particular release as initial scoping done. Once done, it will move on to scope review phase, where the reviewer will review and approve the change if they are fine with the initial scope. So once approved, a release will come into implementation phase, where there will be a certain level of automation being triggered as part of the solution, one of which is creation of a new branch onto stash. So here if we go on OpenTrip repository, and if we can see on the network diagram, we could clearly see over here that there is a new release branch being created for this particular release IRM 451, which is this one. And this is and since for this particular release we have included features or bugs or improvements into this release, there could be a scenario where even portfolio managers can, when portfolio managers are coming up with an idea or a concept, they can simply align their idea or concept with a particular release. So that particular scenario we have covered in our previous webinar on Agile Portfolio Management, and the video is available on YouTube. So interested people can go and view that particular webinar. So once this particular release is into implementation phase, that's the time when the delivery team can take up the included features or improvements for implementation. So here, as we can see on the delivery board, this particular feature for directional coordinates table is currently into elaboration phase. So let's consider here the scenario where this particular feature includes a single story. Just to mention that in real-time scenario, there could be a case that there usually is case that a particular feature would have multiple or n number of stories or bugs included in it, but just due to time constraints, we have included only a single story into this particular feature. Now, so here we are assuming that the break story has been done and the elaboration part has already been captured. So let us assume that the requirement for the feature are already captured, and just in case anybody is interested on how efficiently and effectively we are carrying out requirement management, you can refer to our second webinar of this series, which is Agile Requirement Management, and that too is available on YouTube. So once a feature is now into once the elaboration phase has been completed, it can be taken up for implementation phase. And as I have mentioned earlier, we are considering a case of parallel development where two developers are working parallelly onto the same parent branch. So here, since as soon as this particular feature has been taken for implementation, there is a new branch being created for that particular feature as well. So here we can see a feature branch gets created with the code base to that of the parent branch, which is the release branch. So now, once all the stories are created and they are under implementation phase, so Scrum Masters here can go and load the backlog onto the sprint, and they can start with the sprint. So let's say if the sprint is started. So once the sprint is started, so that's the time when developers can take this particular implementation of a particular story or improvement or bug fixes as well. So once all these stories are created and they are under implementation and various teams have started working on them, then comes a part of monitoring the ongoing work. So to know more about efficient and effective way of carrying out the project management activities in Agile way, stay tuned with us for our next webinar on Agile project management using Atlassian tools. So now here in this case, let us consider that this particular story for having a table containing direction coordinates with yellow background has been taken by the developer for implementation. So as soon as this particular story has been taken up for implementation, in the traditional scenarios, developer has to perform various activities prior starting the actual functional implementation. So that may include interaction with Git and getting the repository, remote repository onto the local developers box, and then by creating, and then they have to create a new branch and checking out that particular branch, and once implementation has been completed, they have to push their branch onto the remote repository. So as part of this particular solution, the entire Git interaction or the stash interaction has been abstracted from the developer, and developer simply has to perform two steps just to move this particular story ticket from ready for implementation to implementation, and now they are good to start with their functional implementation. So just to verify, we can see over here there is a new branch for this particular story gets auto created onto developer's local box. So the entire repository gets auto cloned onto the developer's local box, and a new branch gets auto created and checked out. So developers can simply start working on his actual function implementation. So here, let's consider where developer is now implementing the requirement which has been provided. So he has to implement a table with yellow background. And just to mention over here that usually developers use some ID for development purpose, but just due to time constraint, I am using terminal itself. So once the developer is done with his implementation, developer simply has to commit his changes, saying that table has been incorporated. And once the commit has been done, developer simply has to mark this particular implementation, this particular story ticket as implemented, and move it for review. Now once the ticket is, now this particular story is moved onto the review phase, if we can have a quick look at this particular story Jira ticket over here. Would request you all to just note over here that there is no review button being provided onto this particular story ticket. There's neither an approve button nor a decline button over here. This will enforce the reviewer to directly go onto Stash and have an authentic code review. So a reviewer can directly go onto Stash by clicking on this particular pull request which has been generated and is available under developers development panel over here. So let us assume that a developer is now going to review this particular story. So here he comes onto the particular story ticket, and he clicks on the pull request. So once reviewer logs in onto Stash, he can see that there is one new pull request gets created for this particular story. And once he click on this particular story, he can see the code changes which were performed as part of the development implementation, and also he can see the status of the build. So using this information, a reviewer is quite well equipped in taking the decision whether to approve this particular pull request or decline this particular pull request. So in our case, let's assume that the reviewer is fine with the code implementation and he approves the change. Now once approved, there are certain automation activities being taken place as part of this particular solution. So one is to have an automated deployment onto the configured environment. So here in our case, for this particular story, there is a environment for system testing being configured, and on this particular environment there has been auto deployment being taken place, and also just on click of approve onto Stash, this particular Jira ticket will be forced to move to testing phase and will be available for testing to the system testing team. So let us see if the deployment has been taken place onto the system test environment. So if we can see over here for the system test environment, this was the earlier look and feel as part of initial launch version, and with the new build being deployed as part of this story implementation, we can see clearly over here there is a new table being appearing with yellow background over here on the left hand side. So if so here testers can go and perform the system testing over here, and without getting into much detail on test management right now, may I ask all to stay tuned for our upcoming webinar in this series on Agile test management using Atlassian tools. So now considering over here that this particular the testing team is fine with the implementation of this particular story, they can simply go and pass this particular ticket. Now as soon as any story or improvement is passed by the testers, it will onto stash, it will go and merge onto the parent branch. So there would be an auto merge being taken place. So here we can clearly see that there is a story branch which gets auto merged with that of parent branch, which is the feature branch. So here we can also see there is a new build being triggered for the story and feature as well, and the parent feature as well. So once the implementation is done, then if we can go back to the feature, the respective feature, and if we can see over here, the story which was part of this particular feature has been closed, and any feature can be is said to be completed once all the included stories or bugs or improvements are marked as completed. So here, since we have considered the case of a single story being included as part of this particular feature, with the implementation of this particular story, even the feature can be marked as implemented. Now, once a particular feature is marked as implemented, we can see over here that it asks us for the deployment details. Now, using this particular option, we can perform, the system can automatically perform selective environments, selective deployment. So here, as we can see, the environment details are functional integration test environment and performance test environment. So since an integrated build which has been generated onto the feature branch can be deployed on the functional test environment, and also a performance testing can be performed onto that. So this particular scenario would be useful where an initial build has been deployed in both these instances, and later on functional testing team found few bugs related to user interface and not related to performance. So a new build has been generated with the fixes of those bugs, and that particular new build is required to be deployed only on to the functional integration test environment without affecting the testing, without affecting any of the performance testing currently being carried out by the performance testing team. So in that scenario, this particular use case would be very much helpful. So now once this particular feature has been marked as implemented, it will go on to the review phase, where again we can see that there is no review buttons, approve, nor decline is available onto the feature ticket, and reviewer has to go onto the generated pull request onto stash itself. So here, if we can directly go onto the respective feature ticket, which is 452. So here, in this particular feature ticket, reviewer can go onto the stash by clicking on the pull request over here, and we can see that a new pull request has been generated. So reviewer can see the build status over here and onto the right hand side, and even the code changes which were performed as part of the implementation. And if the reviewer is fine, he can approve the changes. And again, with this particular activity, again, there is an auto deployment being performed onto the configured environment. So in our case, since we have configured 2 environments, and we tried to we checked both the environments to be deployed, and those environments are in functional integration test environment and performance testing environment. So as soon as the deployment has been auto deployment has been done, it will come onto the deployment phase, where deployment team can perform a sanity check onto the deployment on these environments. So here, once the deployment has been done, let us go and see if the deployment on both these environments, the functional testing environment. So this is the integration functional test environment, where we can see that there is no this was the earlier look and feel as part of initial launch, and with the refresh, let us see if a new build has been deployed containing a new table on the left hand side with yellow background, and same we can see on to the performance test environment as well. So here, just to mention that this is the parallel deployment being taken place automatically by this particular solution. And if the deployment team is fine with the sanity, they can mark this particular build to be deployed and move this for the testing team to perform their testing. So if the testing team is fine with the implementation, they can simply go onto the respective feature ticket and mark this particular ticket as approved. Now again, by just marking this particular implementation feature as approved, we can go and see there is a new build being triggered onto Bamboo for this particular release branch, and this particular feature branch gets auto merged onto the parent branch, which is the release branch. So let me refresh once. So here, as we can see, the feature branch has been auto merged to the parent branch, which is the release branch. And since we are considering a scenario where parallel development is taking place, so at the same time there is a parallel development being carried out by developer 2 by the second developer onto the respective improvement branch. So here, if we can go back onto the delivery board, and we can see the status of this particular release over here. So here we can clearly see that the feature implementation has been done, whereas the implementation of the improvement is currently in progress. So developer 2 is currently working on feature onto the improvement, where he has to implement the search option. So in traditional scenario or in current scenario, what happens is whenever two developers are working parallelly on the same parent branch, whenever the parent branch has been updated, it is very much difficult for the developers to notify to other developers who are working on the same parent branch. So with this particular solution, that scenario is handled very easily. So here, as we can see, developer 2 is working on this particular improvement ticket in Jira. So here in Jira itself, he can see that there has been an instruction being provided to him that local repository needs to be updated as the parent repository has changed, and developer needs to update his local repository with that of remote repository. Also, an auto comments being provided such that even via mail also a developer can get the notification about the update of the remote repository or the parent repository. So in traditional or in the current scenario, what happens is once second developer gets notified about any update on the parent branch, he has to interact with stash or Git, and he has to update the local repository from the remote repository. But here in our solution, since we have abstracted entirely, stash or Git entirely from the developer. Developer simply has to go onto the update repo button, and he simply has to click this particular button. By just clicking on this update repo button, the local repository of the developer gets updated with that of remote repository, and only in case of any merge conflicts being found, this particular improvement ticket gets moved onto the code conflict state, where developer has to where developer's manual intervention is required in order to resolve the code conflict. So otherwise, there is no manual intervention required during the merging, and developer can simply update his local repository with that of remote repository. So now, since it is in implementation phase, and let us go onto the developer's local box, and if we can see that on developer's local box, there has been an auto creation of a improvement branch, and it's been checked out such that developer can directly concentrate on his functional implementation. So now let us consider that developer is now implementing his changes, and as part of the implementation, there needs to be a search option being included on top of map. So here, once the implementation has been done, developer has to simply commit his changes, saying that search option has been implemented, and once the commit has been done, developer can mark this particular improvement ticket and send it for review. So once send it for review, this particular improvement will come on to review, and as you can see, the reviewer can only review using stash. So let us say developer is now going onto the respective improvement ticket, and reviewer can now see the pull request, and a new pull request has been generated for this particular implementation. So he can by seeing the build status and the code changes, he can review the code changes, and he can take the decision of approving or declining. So considering in our case that reviewer is fine with the implementation, he has approved the change, and once approved, an auto deployment would take place onto the configured environment, which in our case is system test environment, and it will automatically move the ticket onto the testing phase. So let us see if a new build has been deployed onto the system test environment. So as part of earlier build which has been deployed, a new table was appearing onto the left hand side, and there is no search option at the top. And with the new build deployed, let us refresh this to see the status of the new build. So here we can see that there is a new search option appearing at the top of map. So once this implementation is done, and testers are fine with this particular testing, they can simply go and pass this particular implementation. And once passed, as shown earlier, the respective improvement branch will get auto-merged with that of parent branch, which is the release branch in our case. So here we can see that this particular improvement branch gets auto-merged with that of parent branch, which is the release branch. So now once the implementation of this particular release or this particular implementation of improvement has been done, let us go back onto the release board, and there we can see the status of the release. So by looking onto the delivery board, we can clearly see that all the included improvement of features as part of this particular release are completed, and that's the time when this particular release can be marked as implemented. So once marked as implemented, again we can see that it asks us for the deployment details, where to have selective deployment, where we facilitate a selective deployment as per the configuration, and this configuration can be changed at runtime from Jira ticket itself. So here let us select pre-production environment, pre-production functional environment, and by moving the ticket from implementation to pre-production deployment, there has been an auto deployment being performed as part of the solution onto the pre-production environment. So let us see if the deployment has been taken successfully on pre-production environment. So this was the initial look and feel of the initial launch release 1.0, and let us refresh to see if the latest build containing the implementation of a feature, which is the table, and improvement, which is the search option, is now appearing over here. Now let us see if once the deployment team performs sanity and they are fine with the deployment, they can move the ticket to the pre-production testing. And once moved on to the pre-production testing, let us consider over here where pre-production testers found a bug with the improvement. So here on click on search button, a new error pops up. So the Scrum Master consults with the development team and found that the implementation of fixing this particular bug may postpone or may push the release date, which release manager or the product owner doesn't incline to. And with that particular approach, they decide to go only with the implementation of feature 1 and by excluding the implementation of this particular improvement. So in that case, rescoping would be required. And in usual scenarios, whenever there is a scope change, there is a lot of complexity involved, like reverting of the code base by the developer and pushing the reverted code base onto the source control tool, and if at all there is any configuration change required onto Bamboo plan as well. So with this particular solution, this scenario becomes very easy, and by just clicking on a rescope button, entire functionality can be handled. So here, since release owner or release manager or the product owner decides to exclude with the implementation of the improvement, which is the search option, so they can click on exclude tab and select the search option on map, and they can simply rescope this particular release. And just by rescoping a release, the entire reversal of the code base will take place and new build gets triggered onto Bamboo. So let us see if the new build gets triggered onto Bamboo. So here we can see that a new build has been triggered and it is currently in progress, build ID number 4. So this particular build contains only the code base of the implementation of the very first feature, which is the direction coordinates of the table, and the code base has excluded or reverted the code of search optional map of this particular improvement. So here, since the build is successful, this particular release is now marked, is now rescoped successfully, and we can also see on stash there is a new commit for this particular release branch being created. So here we can see that a new commit has been created for this release branch. So now that's the time when this particular release can be marked as rescoped. And once rescoping has been done and is approved by the reviewer, so since the implementation of once the implementation of all the included features or improvements has been done, this particular feature can be marked, this particular release can be marked as implemented. And since we have considered only the pre-production deployment, we'll move ahead with the implementation. And once this particular release is marked as implemented, there has been auto deployment being carried out onto the configured environment, which is the pre-production functional environment. So here we can go on to the pre-production environment, and as we can see, as part of earlier build which was deployed, there were implementation of a feature which is a table and a search option as well. So here let us see if the new build has been deployed, and let us refresh. So by refreshing, we can clearly see over here that there is only a table being appearing over here with no search option coming at the top of the map. So this signifies that the code base or the implementation of that particular improvement has been reverted automatically by the solution. So now if the deployment team is fine with the deployment, they can mark it as deployed, saying that it is available for testing. And if the testing team is fine with the implementation, they can mark this particular ticket as approved. They can provide a sign off. And once sign off, it comes onto the ready for production implementation, production deployment phase, where it waits for the actual production window. So as per the outage or the production deployment window, this particular ticket will be moved onto the production deployment phase, where the entire deployment will be automatically taken care by the solution itself, and this will perform an auto deployment onto the production environment. So if we can see the production environment over here, this was the initial look and feel as part of release 1.0, and now with the release of 1.1, let us see if the change of that particular feature implementation is appearing over here. So here we can see that a new build has been deployed, And there is new table appearing with the direction coordinates and yellow background onto the left hand side at the bottom. So this is now available for once the production deployment team finds that performance sanity and they are good to go ahead with the deployment, they can mark, they can release this particular release build for UAT or for user acceptance testing. So if user finds this particular implementation as per his expectation, and he can provide a sign off. So once received the sign off by the users for user acceptance testing, this particular release can be marked as released or launched. So here let us see how a release versions are helpful in tracking all the steps which we have carried out till now. So here for release 1.1, let us see how it creates a release notes automatically. So here, as we can see under the summary page, that this particular release includes, release 1.1 includes implementation of a feature, and also if we can go and see, it automatically creates the release notes. So even release note says that it includes implementation of one feature. Now similarly, if we can go and see the release notes of the initial launch, we can clearly see over here that it includes implementation of two features over here. So once this particular implementation has been done, we can clearly say that most of our issues got resolved, which we have seen earlier. So with this solution that has a defined branching and merging strategy, coupled with customized Jira release workflow, we are able to minimize or even eliminate worries of build and release engineers, developers, and almost every participant in the release process. The solution supports the most important feature of rescoping, which is usually of higher impact as it involves a lot of complexities. And by standardizing the use of tool with a single control point as Jira, the complexity of the build and deployment is reduced. At the same time, the visibility to the higher management is considerably improved. This solution surely empowers the higher management to dynamically decide what to launch and what to hold back based on the volatile and constantly changing market scenes. So that is it from the demonstration, technical demonstration side. For the rest of the webinar, I'll hand over the control to our technical marketing specialist, Brendon.
So thank you very much, Anoop, for doing that great technical presentation. Like I said, we have full solutions here at AdTech. It's not just going to be a quick little bit. We're going to give you all of the details for our technical solutions. We want to make sure that you're fully empowered to do everything that you need to do. We have gone ahead and recorded this video because I know there was a lot of information, and everybody's going to want to go over it a few times to make sure you're really able to fully understand. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor for questions. You can either use the group chat feature, or you can raise your hand or submit a question through the digitally collated question system with Citrix. And I'm just going to scan that for questions from the audience. If you don't have any right now, please feel free to save them up and send them over to me via email, or to use the question window, and we'll direct everything either to myself or to Anoop to get everything answered for you. And like I said, this video has been fully recorded. I'm going to go ahead and send it out to everybody so that you can go over it at your convenience. So Wendy just asked a really interesting question. She said, could you show how the bamboo is configured accordingly? So I'm going to go ahead and bring Anoop in on that. Anoop, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi. So there is basically two plans, two generic plans we have created. One is the build plan, which is a generic plan, and another is deployment plan. So basically, for the build plan, there is no hard coding or there is no configuration of the environments over there, and we have passed the environments from Jira itself as part of this solution onto the build plan. So
Wendy,
does
do you
that
feel?
answer your question?
Yeah. Thanks for that answer, Noop. I appreciate it. I'm sure Wendy appreciates it too. Yeah, she just said thank you in the window. So does anybody else have any questions that Anoop or I can answer? So once again, we're going to be sending this info out via email. If you would like to email me directly, you can contact me at brendon.kaplan@adtech.com. Of course, this information is going to be showing up in your inbox, but I just want to give others a chance to formulate any questions if they have any. So that's BRENDAN.KAPLAN@adtech.com. So it looks like there are no further questions. If anybody does develop them later on, feel free to email me or to contact us through this webinar. We're going to go ahead and collate any information that comes in and make sure to get right back to you. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I know there was a lot of information. So take your time, process it, and we will, of course, be available at any time. Thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the afternoon. Take care. Bye.